Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tonight, we would like to start with a story of former Chief of Propaganda for Zanu PF, Professor Jonathan Moyo, and what he said about Mnangagwa.
Are you corrupt?
No, in fact, this is laughable, seriously laughable. First of all, this is an accusation coming from the most corrupt politicians and public officials in the history of our country. They cannot account for the assets that they have. The richest individual in the Republic of Zimbabwe is Emmerson Mnangagwa. The one person who was responsible for setting up Zanu PF companies when he was the Secretary for Finance of the ruling party is Emmerson Mnangagwa. There is no cent that comes from those companies, including a bank, including investments in the region in countries like Namibia and even South Africa. The person who led the plunder of resources, even in foreign countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, leading to the United Nations investigating and coming up with a report that is still there, is Emmerson Mnangagwa, along with the military cabal of General Chiwenga, SP Moyo, the person who brought the Chinese to plunder Chiadzwa diamond resources for Zimbabwe, up to a point where we have, at the very least, over a period from 2007 to 2014, some 12 to 15 billion dollars in diamond revenue that remains unaccounted for, that went into the pockets of individuals. These people have staged a coup, not just to grab power for the sake of grabbing power, but in order to cover up their corruption. That command agriculture was nothing but a looting scheme.
Well, that is very interesting, coming from the man who was one of Robert Mugabe's probably most influential ministers. Professor Jonathan Moyo, there cannot be any doubt, has played a major role in the creation of the Zanu PF dictatorship, particularly since the year 2000, when he joined the party, or thereabout. He was, without doubt, Zanu PF's main strategist. And he created the Zanu PF dictatorship we know. It is interesting that that interview was given after he had to escape from Zimbabwe, running away from his former Zanu PF colleagues who were after him. He has been holed up in Kenya ever since the 2017 military coup. This is a recent video clip of him in Kenya.
That's a boy.
Hey, Ben. Aiva madziva avamazambuko ka.
Yeah, yeah, Pakaiva. Good day to everybody. Good day to you too. Uh, yeah. I mean, that's a life of a politician, especially when you play, in spaces that democracy does not exist. This is the end, thereof for you. So, some may feel sorry for him to say, how far you have fallen, but, his part that he played in further cementing this dictatorship is no doubt very, very great. I mean, I remember, growing up as a child, you used to, be very, very interested and looking forward to ZBC. There was variety of programs there, and then he decided to put, he was the Minister of Information then. He decided to cancel everything and have 100% local uh, content through ZBC and all the other radio stations. We had one TV station and a couple of radio stations, and he managed to change everything. And from thereafter, it was all Zanu PF programs, in and out, in and out. The whole, there's nothing left to look forward to. And we also know he had his bicycle scandal that he did there. You know, so he cannot, in the beginning of the interview, he was asked, and he declares to say, that is preposterous. I wasn't corrupt. No, he was corrupt. Unfortunately, he may not have taken as much as, Emerson Mnangagwa and the other cronies, but, the fact is, you too, right? So undeniably, he is corrupt, and he had a big part to play in cementing this regime. And unfortunately, like I said, with space where there's no democracy and where democracy does not exist, you are used and you are spewed, willy-nilly. And unfortunately, he was used, and now is no longer relevant. And as you can see now, it's a sight for sore eyes. He's on the bicycle. Yet, ministers in Zimbabwe, they have motorcades, minimum of 4 top of the range cars. We're talking of Land Cruisers, Hiluxes, and stuff like that. Yeah, but that's how it is. I don't feel sorry for him. I think he's getting what he deserves, right? You treat people badly, you will get the same outcome.
Well, Jonathan Moyo helped to create the Zanu PF dictatorship. And he is in exile, running away from the same animal that he helped to create. He worked so hard to create. I think it is an important lesson here that people should not forget that they are humans, and that they should not forget the rule of law, justice, and creating a better system for all while they are at the top, while they are in positions of power and authority. Because if you create a monster, which Jonathan Moyo cannot deny that he did play a major role in creating the Zanu PF dictatorship we know, then I think it is right that before his death, he gets to test the bitterness of the medicine he was so generous in creating and dishing out to others. We had an opportunity to create a free, fair, and credible society just society in Zimbabwe. And he chose not to, for the sake of power and greed. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he was going to stay in power forever. He didn't. There are those who are in power today, and they've got the same short-sighted mentality and arrogance to think that they are untouchable. This really should send a shockwave among them to seriously look at themselves in the mirror. The Zanu PF dictatorship they helped to create is destroying Zimbabwe. Millions of ordinary people are living in abject poverty. The Zanu PF thugs themselves think they are untouchable. Well, we can see now that at least Professor Jonathan Moyo, who thought he was untouchable, he is human after all. Agara maruseva achichera makurukwe nesuwo zvedu ordinary Zimbabweans vanapovu. Please struggle.
I mean, the list is endless when it comes to those that have fallen, and you find them right at the bottom of the food chain again once they thought they were untouchable. I mean, recently we saw the former Minister of Education, Lazarus Dokora, waiting for lifts there, trying to get himself back home. And then we also saw, how Mugabe was. Mugabe never died because of, the illness. Yes, he was sick. But what really hurt him was the fact that, he had a broken heart. The people that he dined and wined with, that he shared secrets with, were the ones that let him down at the, in the end. So, I mean, it's just the same, If you look at the coup, how the coup worked out, it's very, very, interesting to see that, they fought amongst themselves. Guns were brought into play, and people dashed at, various points. Guys like Xavier Kasukuere, he's got a bulletproof house, and I bet nobody's staying there, but he's in exile in South Africa there. So it's a clear, it's a clear indication that if you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. Don't think that that you are being protected now, that they will protect you tomorrow. Once they use you, they will get rid of you. That is the same environment where democracy does not exist. It's dog eat dog. What do I get from you? And after that, I move on.
The other interesting story that I wanted to bring tonight is the one being shown in the picture there. This is boys from Dara. The amount of similar postings that I've seen in the last few days is overwhelming. It looks like the Zanu PF propaganda machine is into overdrive. All of them singing praises of Mnangagwa. This is getting to be sickening. They want to create this animal farm style, great leader mentality, where everything is to the praise of Mnangagwa, where Mnangagwa is achieving a lot of things. Zimbabwe is on the march We are progressing. This is what probably the likes of Jonathan Moyo would have been pleased if he was still in Zanu PF. This is the worshipping of the leader to the point of becoming ridiculous. I am disappointed that people in Zimbabwe continue to have this personality cult mentality. A mentality, of course, which Mnangagwa himself encourages, in the sense that anyone who wants to achieve anything in Zimbabwe today must join the queue in praising Mnangagwa. If you do not praise Mnangagwa, you don't get anywhere. But I think it is the people themselves who choose to go down that route. The economy is in a mess. This issue of somehow pretending that Zimbabwe is making progress is a myth. And the propaganda is supposed to counteract that, to brainwash people into believing that Zimbabwe is making progress, when in reality, we are not.
You know, for those that can see, you know, or they can read in between the lines, I think this is you know, PR, you know, damage control. I mean, of late we have seen, you know, the name of Emmerson Mnangagwa take a huge beating, has been dragged down the mud for this, let me just say, for the whole year. It's just not, you know, the Chivayo issue. We know of the gold mafia, and his name has been right at the top every time there has been a scandal. So I think this is just trying to do damage control, where, you know, we try and show what he is doing here and there. You know, this presidential scheme. I mean, the presidential scheme should have been done and over, and, you know, with, in terms of goats, we should have been talking of something else. But the money had already been stolen. If it wasn't because his name was mentioned in all this, I think, you know, there would have been no worry. But now that his name has been drawn at every single point, they have to try and, you know, protect the president. That's what they say. And this is where he is different from Mugabe. You know, Mugabe, at least he was, I think the difference between Mugabe and Mnangagwa is Mugabe, I think he just didn't know. He was out of touch with reality on the ground. Such was his age. I would blame it on his age. You know, people were looting, and he didn't know what was really going on. That's why he, you know, he brought it out to say, you know, there's 15 billion that is missing. What happened? I believe he was totally clueless. Probably his wife had a part to play in it, but he was clueless. Unlike now, Mnangagwa, he is the brains behind the operation. He is the one that is sending these youngsters to do these missions. You know, every time you hear there is number one, there is number one. For you to talk to number one, which is the president, right? His name has been put right out there. So all these here, you know, schemes and you know, portraying him as a nice figure and all that is just all PR, just trying to clear up the mess, you know, take you know, the eyes off the target and then look elsewhere. You know, right now we are going into this SADC summit here, and I mean, they are really doing the PR, and they're also scaring people at the same time to say, we know that, you know, there are unruly people it's overdrive. You're right. Everything now is in overdrive in terms of trying to protect his legacy. But at the end of the day, I sincerely believe that, his day is coming. It may not be through, the democratic process, but maybe from within ZANU PF, they are just going to do the same thing that, they did to Mugabe. And I wouldn't be surprised about that. But also, I mean, it's just not Emerson Mnangagwa. Let's look at the opposition. We had Chamisa do the same thing. I think they're basically just the same. Chamisa promised a lot of people that this time around, come in your numbers. People turned up, right? They risked and they went and voted, despite the warnings to say you're participating in rigged elections, you will lose. They went ahead, and now he's disappeared, and you still find people that sing praise. So sing praise to say he's achieved. What has he achieved? We don't see. Just the same. What has Emerson Mnangagwa achieved? People are wallowing in poverty, right? This is, for the Triple C, people they risk their lives to go and vote for Nelson Chamisa. And what does he do? He disappears, and he comes and he does a little PR, and life should just go back. This is where I agree with you again to say, now it looks as if the problem is us. We keep on, we don't want to blame our leaders for their shortcomings. We want them to look, pure, semi-gods, such that there is no vile, they don't do no wrong, Yet they are leading us further and further astray. And we need to start pointing a finger to say, hey, we demand accountability. And as long as we don't we don't demand for accountability, and we do not call a spade, we will be dragged along, into all this here. And they will look as if, they've done nothing wrong. I mean, you can see Emerson Mnangagwa sitting on a gold chair. It's as if he's done something for anybody. Which, we are still at point zero. 2030 is just a dream. The fundamentals to getting to that dream are not even laid yet. And we're already past halfway his term. How it's not just going to be like a bolt from the blue. So it's us now that I think we have to see, beyond our noses. Secondly, we need to demand for accountability from these leaders.
Well, one of the things that the ZANU PF propaganda machine has stepped up is, on the one hand, they're trying to portray this image that Zimbabwe's economy is on the right track and we are making good progress. The truth of the matter, of course, is the economy has been on the downward trend ever since the country's independence. And ever since Mnangagwa came into office, things have got even worse. By blatantly rigging last year's elections, Mnangagwa confirmed that Zimbabwe is a pariah state ruled by corrupt, incompetent, and ruthless thugs who are only managing to stay in office because they rig elections. But they've got to keep up this false narrative that the country is on track for economic recovery. They've got to keep up this pretense that an upper middle income status is ours by 2030. The truth of the matter is, of course, Vision 2030 is a mirage. And recently we have seen them stepping up also on the other front, trying to give excuses why Zimbabwe is a failed state. The issue of sanctions has come up again and again and again. This is a video clip, a short one, of an Al Jazeera guy interviewing one of Mnangagwa's apologists. We can listen to it. It's not a long one. Then we can comment on it.
There's a growing call for the removal of a 20-year sanction against the southern African nation of Zimbabwe, which critics say is harming the nation's economics and its people. Earlier today, the head of the African Union Commission demanded the lifting of all of the sanctions, which were originally imposed due to election rigging and human rights abuses. Zimbabweans, as well as ambassadors from countries in the Southern Africa Development Community, say the sanctions levied in 2002 by some Western nations, including the United States, are impeding Zimbabwe's economic recovery and driving communities into unprecedented hunger. Joining me now to provide further insight is Rutendo Martiniarare, the chairperson of Zimbabwe Anti-Sanctions Movement, also the CEO of Frontline Start Marketing Consultancy. Rutendo, welcome to the show. What are some of the sanctions imposed by Western powers, such as the United States, and how have they directly impacted the Zimbabwe that we see today?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I just wanted to adjust something and say that there is no evidence that the sanctions that have been imposed on Zimbabwe are because of election rigging or any other reason, because they're extrajudicial. There's been no trials, there's been no opportunity for anybody to answer in any court. So it's actually punishment or lynching as far as we're concerned, because of us taking back our land and us going into Congo to defend the Congo from US-sponsored Congolese and Rwandan rebels that were sponsored Rwandan rebels and Ugandans. But anyway, let me answer the question as to what are the type of sanctions that are on Zimbabwe. We've got.
Well, I think we have had, those of us who have had the opportunity to listen to this guy will know what he's going to say next. And I would not want to go into that. What I would want to comment on personally is my disappointment with Al Jazeera. We can listen to the full video clip, and you'll find that in it, the guy never asked him the question, the pertinent question: what has done more damage to the Zimbabwe economy? Is it sanctions, or is it corruption? Al Jazeera made a documentary last year giving details of how Zimbabwe is losing up to 80% of its gold to gold smuggling. This is not, even a rich country would find this absurd. 80%. And for a poor country like Zimbabwe, this is unbelievable. And yet here we are. Somebody claiming that it's sanctions. I think many Zimbabweans have heard that song, that apology of blaming sanctions for all the country's ills. The truth of the matter is, Zanu PF rigged the 2023 elections as they have rigged elections in the past, thus denying the people of Zimbabwe a meaningful say on who governs the country. The people of Zimbabwe, if they were given a free, fair, and credible election, the opportunity to vote freely. Somebody once said that the people would vote for a donkey if Mugabe and the donkey were the only two on the ballot. The same could be said about Mnangagwa. The people are so desperate to get rid of this ZANU PF dictatorship, they will vote for a donkey. Here is the regime that has imposed itself on the nation. Let's be clear on that. Last year's election, SADC, the regional body, AU, the continental body, both of them condemned Zimbabwe's election as flawed. They did not mention anything about sanctions. And what has got sanctions to do with rigging elections? Even if there are sanctions or no sanctions, why are you denying the ordinary people of Zimbabwe a meaningful say in the governance of the country? The people of Zimbabwe have been stuck with a regime that is corrupt and incompetent and has ruined the country's economy because they have no meaningful say in the governance of the country. We can blame sanctions all we want. There is no way one can ever justify rigged elections. In the beginning of his answer, Matinyarira was saying that there is no evidence of rigged elections. Well, SADC did observe Zimbabwe's elections in 2008 and the AU, and they both rejected the result as ZANU PF victory. ZANU PF was only forced to sign the global political agreement of 2008 because both SADC and the AU, for the first time, had rejected those elections as free, fair, and credible. You don't have to go to court to see the wanton violence that was perpetuated by ZANU PF, the blatant cheating in the March 2008 elections, where Mnangagwa himself stopped ZEC from declaring the results and went on to spend the next 6 weeks counting 5 million votes. How upset can you be? This issue of sanctions is meant to just divert the people's attention. In other words, ZANU PF, like we said before, they on the one hand want to create the impression that Zimbabwe is forging ahead. We are going to be an upper middle income country thanks to the Second Republic. But the truth of the matter is we are not. And on the other hand, they are trying to come up with an excuse why Zimbabwe is a failed state, because we are under sanctions. I think we need to focus on the real issue. Zimbabwe is a pariah state, and as long as it remains a pariah state, there will be no meaningful economic recovery.
I think this guy is a very selfish individual. You know, he's doing it for himself. You know, he's advocating for himself. I mean, look, in the beginning he says they're sanctioning for taking our land, the same land that he's run away from. You know, we need people that actually can defend the position that Zimbabwe is in whilst you are there. Right, to say, look, I am doing it because I am there. But no, he's run away, he's set up. I thought sometimes, you know, it's easier for you to even set up a company in your own home country, and then you get as your HQ in your country, and then you can divest going wherever you want. But he's taken off to some other country and he's doing it from there, and he wants others to, you know, to live the horror, and then he can justify. I mean, from my point, I would like to ask him if I could see him, or if he could tell me, just to explain to me, to say the amount just within this, you know, period, this year, the amount of scandals that we have heard, you know, that have been brought forward, and the amounts, you know, that have been mentioned, would you then come back and say Zimbabwe is suffering because of sanctions? I mean, just goats has just cost Zimbabwe 80 plus million. Just goats alone. We're not going to go into, you know, the gold mafia, because those are huge figures, because those are calculated, you know, per day, per year, you know, per month, how much we lose from these year gold mafia. And Zanu PF is in there. Number one has been talked about so many times, you know, and then here comes somebody says it's sanctions. Who do you want to believe such nonsense? Every ZEC, you know, inflated, you know, prices, not just, you know, by 100%, thousands. Something that you could get for $3,000 has been inflated into $1 million. And how do you explain that? Would you blame sanctions? Surely, you know, I would say to him, you know what? You're also going to have your day. You know, your selfishness. You want other people to suffer, the ordinary people that are in Zimbabwe, and you are claiming that no, everything is okay. While you are in South Africa, come and do your business in Zimbabwe. You say the environment is good, is conducive. Set up your company, and we will see how well it will last. Because everything that you want, you will not get unless you are connected. Period. Bogus companies are the ones that, you know, are taking tenders and doing all this. Zimbabwe has lost billions because of corruption, not sanctions. So whatever he's got to say, I'm glad you paused the video, because I think whatever he's got to say there is absolutely nonsense. I would wish him stay in Zimbabwe. Then when you are in Zimbabwe, then you can speak to say everything is well. My company is doing very well. How can you say we are sanctioned for land that you are running away from? I find that very, very, very foolish to say something like that. Go and, you know, live, walk the talk, basically. Yeah, come back, walk the talk, then we can move forward.
Well, on the issue of ending the sanctions, it is shocking that some people are spending so much energy in, when the Americans are a separate government, as much as the rest of the West are a separate government, and they can make their own foreign policies. I don't think imposing sanctions on a country by a country is something that has got to be approved by the UN. Any country can decide we are not going to do business with you. What I find amazing is that there are Zimbabweans who are spending so much time and energy trying to persuade America to lift these sanctions. And yet the same individuals are doing absolutely nothing to tell Zanu PF to end corruption. And I can say, and I'll say it again, the only way we are going to end corruption in Zimbabwe is by first stopping Zanu PF rigging the elections. As long as ZANU PF has got the carte blanche powers to rig elections, corruption and mismanagement would not go away, would never end. So on the issue of elections, I did mention the role that Mnangagwa played in the 2008. Here's a short clip of him admitting the very thing, which our friend here says there is no evidence.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komogwenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose vatofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini katida sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvipi gadzirai chi cabinet asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma-results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vese vari kuma below 35 they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusuru, we know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
The number one priority for Zimbabwe today is to do something to end this case of rigged elections. This is our number one priority. Nothing will change until we cure ourselves of this double case of rigged elections and bad governance. What we saw in that video clip is this real Zimbabwe political situation where violence is the order of the day. It is a pity that the country had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have stopped ZANU PF rigging elections during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. Alas, Morgan Tsvangirai and company failed to implement even one token reform. And they've been participating in flawed elections ever since, knowing fully well that participating in these flawed elections will only give ZANU PF legitimacy. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Some of us have been asking people, did Chamisa lie about plugging all the vote rigging loopholes? It's shocking how many Zimbabweans have avoided answering the question. Instead, they've been defending Chamisa. They've been doing everything except answer the question. The truth of the matter is he did lie. And of course, they don't want to admit that, because in admitting it, they will also be admitting that they were foolish to have believed him. We are failing to learn from the past. The people made the same mistake in 2013 when they participated without any reforms implemented. They didn't admit it. And so they repeated the same mistake in 2018. Chamisa promised MDC alliance has got stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Of course he was lying. The people did not admit it. And now we have got the same problem again. 2023 people participated because they believed Chamisa's lie that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. I think the idea that they are refusing to admit it, so that come 2028, they will repeat the same mistake, is unthinkable. This is where we have got to stand up and face these people and tell them in no uncertain terms that you cannot continue this insanity. It is insanity. 44 years after independence, and we are still failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Zimbabwe is a failed state because we failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Forget the sanctions. We'll never address the sanctions is not the main problem. Corruption is. And we'll never address corruption until we have solved the problem of rigged elections. Thank you very much for those of you who were able to join us. Ben, I don't know whether you want to give your closing remarks there.
Thank you. So in closing, I would say, let us not have selective bias. Dr. Nevis Mumba, when he read out the SADC Observer report, everybody was very joyful, and we accepted what he had to say, right? And which was the truth. I'm not taking that away. It was the truth. Zimbabwe elections fell short of all the measures that were put in place, the standards that were put in place. I agree with him. But then he still went ahead, later he gave, there's a short video clip where he says, it is now up to the people of Zimbabwe to get themselves out of this mess. And not only did he give us that, he also told us what to do. He says, you need to get reforms implemented before the election. Don't talk about reforms after you have already, gone through the process. The time to start is now. And that voice should be loud and clear. Those are his words. I'm not going to quote, but that's exactly, what he was saying, what he was trying to say. This is the time where we need to shout and to demand reforms. And SADC made it very, very simple for us. People do not believe SADC helped us. SADC gave recommendations. All we just have to do is follow up on those recommendations and make sure they are implemented before the next election. If they don't do that, they have SADC to deal with, because they are the ones that recommended it. And we want them, we tell them, we want your recommendations. Therefore, we can move forward. We cannot expect SADC to come and run elections for us, to come and get us out of the mess because we participated, knowing fully well the Zanu PF is going to rig. And we expect somebody else to come and bail us out. No. We should do it ourselves. SADC has laid a platform for us. We have been advised Let us not just want to listen to the report and not listen to the after. We were told this is the time, and we are being told this is the time. Stop participating in rigged elections. Demand reforms and put your foot down if you have to and get reforms implemented. It's not the first report. All previous reports, there has been recommendations. But we have never followed up because we think our opposition is doing us a big favor. They have never said anything about it. Their eagerness is to go participate, get part and part, a chunk of the loot. They get money from parliament. They get money for participation. That has been their number one goal, and never about reforms. And unless we do that, and unless we see that for ourselves, we will be here, same time, doing the same thing in 2008, going forward. And it's unthinkable that what would be left of Zimbabwe then. This is the time. Like what Dr. Nevis Mumba said, this is the time.
Thank you very much, Ben. My closing remark is to remind everybody that in this particular case, there is very little chance, if any at all, of getting ZANU PF to implement any meaningful reforms between now and 2028. And the opposition itself, they don't care about reforms. They don't care about implementing reforms. They failed to get even one token reform implemented during the GNU of 2008 to 2013 when they had the golden chance. They will not do so now. So what is the way forward? The way forward is to make sure that people understand that participating in flawed elections that are so flawed, as the quotation I'm showing you at the bottom of the screen there, so illegal that the only logical step is to withdraw. This is what David Coulthard said in his book after the 2013 elections. We should stop participating in an election process only to give ZANU PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. SADC will not step in and act if we participate in these flawed elections in our millions, as happened last year. That is a fundamental truth. I do not blame SADC for that. If we ourselves cannot see the sheer futility of participating in a flawed elections, which we know is flawed, which we know participating will only give ZANU PF legitimacy, then we deserve to suffer. Thank you again very much, Ben, and to the listeners who were able to join us. I hope you'll be able to join us again tomorrow, hopefully the same time, 7 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwe time.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.